Perfect. All right, so we are live. I see the little note. So hi, everybody. I want to welcome everyone from 52 Connections into today's masterclass presentation. We have Dr. Josh Wymore joining us today. And just to give you a little bit of intro on Josh, he has a passion for helping leaders become more of who they were made to be. So as an executive coach, also keynote speaker and trainer with Wymore, Josh has helped nonprofits and Fortune 500 leaders all around the world live and lead with greater purpose and clarity. So his book, Humbler Leadership, which we're going to be doing a giveaway of today, explores the 10 mindsets and skill sets leaders can practice to become humbler. And he and his family proudly call Fort Wayne, Indiana their home. However, right now he is displaced in an Airbnb. He can talk about that if he chooses to. So he is coming with us gracefully from another place and just figuring that life out right now. So we appreciate you, Josh, so much for being here. And I have shared a little bit with the group of how I met you. And I just, through mutual connections and speakers on LinkedIn, I just loved what you had out there and said, all right, I'm just going to go for it and contact this guy and see if he can present in our community here, because what you present on and what your passion is and how well you do it, I think all of us as business owners, entrepreneurs, nonprofits, all of us should learn, obviously, ways to become humbler leaders. So I am excited to hear from you. Before you get started, I would like to give a chance for everyone in the room to introduce themselves to you, if that's okay.
Sure.
So Diana, if you're able to unmute, you're first on my screen. You want to let Josh know who you are?
Sure. I'm Diana Petersack, and I'm a wellness and skincare consultant with a passion for enhancing well-being through comprehensive solutions. And as an entrepreneur, I seamlessly blend my expertise in both wellness and skincare to deliver comprehensive solutions that cater to the unique needs of my clients.
Diana's very active in the community from New York, Buffalo, New York. So yeah.
Nice.
And I don't know.
Home of buffalo wings. Most people don't know that, but that's where the name Buffalo comes from. They're invented in Buffalo, New York.
Absolutely.
And those that are live streaming can't see Trisha and Janice are on also because they aren't showing their faces. But Trish, do you have any introductions you'd like to give? If you're able to talk? If not, that's okay. We can introduce you after. And then Jan.
Hi.
Hi. Do you want to let Josh know who you are?
Sure. I'm not sure why we don't have a picture, but that's okay. Blessings to you, Josh, and thank you so very much for gracing our group here. I think we were all so excited when Sarah announced that you were coming, and some of us are reading your book or have read your book already. And back in the day, I was so excited about servant leadership. And then when yours came along, humbler leadership, it was like, well, this is the next phase. So I am so anxious to learn from you. And my sister and I are involved in Grant Girls Glam. It's a facade for doing nails for Color Street, which we do to keep the lights on. But our true mission is to serve and bring joy to others and help where we can. If there is a person that we can add to their support system that they don't already have, or just be there to listen.
Okay, awesome. What a great purpose. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for being here today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Trisha is with Rant Insurance. So she's one of the advisors and managers over there, and she is looking a lot into leadership. So she says her computer doesn't have a mic, so she's not able to speak. But I'm excited to learn from you today. I'm a manager and recruiter for a multi-office insurance company, Rant Insurance. So, and Sarah Jacobson just popped on. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Hi, I know you were running a little late. I'm glad you were able to jump on. I was just doing some quick introductions with Josh. Do you want to let him know who you are real quick so he can speak to you as well?
Sure. My name is Sarah. I live in Colorado. I am a Christian business coach. I am also a retired teacher and school administrator. I did that for 20 years and have now shifted into the Christian business coaching space. And my the people that I love to work with are the people who are just starting out in business and have no idea where to get started. My life call is to help them ignite action to do the work that they need to do to get their business started. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for popping on. All right, Josh, I'm going to let you take it from here and you can lead us all into humbler leadership.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I've got to just acknowledge off the bat, it's kind of weird to be someone who touts humility and comes on to like preach about that, because, you know, if I'm you, I'm sitting here thinking, who is this guy coming to tell us to be more humble? Like, is he super humble? Because if not, that kind of like makes this whole thing illegitimate. And the good news is for you is I am actually the humblest person in the world. So in fact, my humility kicks your humility in the teeth. I am so humble. If Gandhi were alive today, I'm pretty sure I'd be his role model. So just know today you get to come and sit at the feet of the master. And no, okay.
Great.
That is the last time I will lie to you today. That is not actually true. So let's just acknowledge that it's kind of a weird thing to talk about this. The truth is that I'm actually not a naturally humble person at all. And for many years, I was the total opposite of that. But I came across the humble leader, and those of you who read my book have heard me talk about Brad, and I'll talk about him some more in a minute. But I came across the humble leader who had tools in his leadership toolkit that I did not have. And so it started this process of me becoming really fascinated with how I could become humbler. And I'm convinced now that humility is the foundation of all good leadership. In fact, of all good relationships, of everything you need in life, humility is the foundation for that. And I'm going to convince you that you should make becoming humbler your top priority in life right now. But before I do that, I should probably tell you a little bit about my journey of discovering humility and becoming obsessed with that. So I'll share my slides here. So this is me back in about 2004, 2005. This is me when I was a sophomore in college. And again, not a naturally humble person, but I had a predicament. And my predicament was that I was a college sophomore, but I was also our university's assistant softball coach. And I didn't know really the first thing about softball because I had 2 half seasons of high school baseball under my belt, and that was it. And I knew this, and so as I'm preparing for this season, I'm wondering, how are these women going to respect me as their coach when their bat bags have more coaching experience than I do? And so as I thought about this, I decided, you know, people don't trust leaders who are timid or unsure of themselves. And so what I need to do is just be really confident. And if it seems like I know what I'm doing, then they'll trust me. And so basically I tried to mask my incompetence with confidence. But the problem, as you can probably imagine, is that people saw right through that. They knew I didn't know what I was talking about. They knew that I was kind of hiding it. And so it actually hurt trust even more. And basically we would have this same interaction, you know, once or twice a week where I'd be running a drill and one of the players would come up to me and try to convince me that maybe there was a better way to do it. Go figure that in her 20 years of playing sports, right, she would have some experience with maybe coaches that knew more than I did. And so she would come up and say, hey, you know, we're doing this drill, maybe we should do it this other way. And my response was always, no, this is the way we're doing it, get back in line. And can you believe it? They hated my guts for that. Go figure, this, you know, 19-year-old kid kind of bossing them around. But I had to do that, right? Because again, if I showed weakness, like I didn't know what I was doing, they wouldn't trust me because then I'm not competent anymore. And so we did this battle for an entire softball season and it was exhausting. Our team was terrible. We won like, you know, a third of our games. And I'm just having these emotional bouts, you know, several times a week. And so onto the scene comes Brad. Brad's the other guy there on the screen. Brad became our new coach, and Brad also did not have a background in softball. He had never coached softball before. He played, I think, maybe some like baseball too, but that was it. So very auspicious beginnings for this team with 2 coaches that don't know what they're doing. And the other thing about Brad was that Brad was super nice. He had this like very mellow kind of personality where you talk to him, he'd be like, hey, buddy, how you doing? Oh, it's good to see you. Yeah. And as I'm meeting Brad, I'm thinking, these women are going to chew him up and spit him out. Like, have you been around softball players? They carry bats around in their backpack like they're Ninja Turtles or something. Like they are not the kind of people that work with like really mellow guys like this. I know, because I've been through this, Brad. And so I'm kind of waiting for Brad to get destroyed by these ladies. But strangely, he doesn't. They seem to like him and seem to respect him. And it seems like it's all going pretty well. And so sometime in that first season, Brad asked me to stay after practice one day to talk about an issue I was having with another player. And as soon as he starts this conversation, I know, oh, this is one of those like confrontations, because I've been kind of petty towards her. I've been, been harder on her than some other players. We just, have been butting heads, and he's going to address that with me. And so as he says it, as he starts to bring this up, my defenses are ready to come up and kind of shut this down and walk away. But as he asked me questions, in his really mellow way, hey, tell me what's going on with Lauren here. You guys seem to be butting heads. What's going on there? As he asked me these probing questions, and then starts to even speak into that of like saying, Josh, these are the kinds of challenges you're going to face a lot in life. And I really want to see you grow here, because this is going to help set you up well for success down the road. He's giving me this advice and basically telling me I need to grow up, man up, take responsibility here. And I'm like hugging the guy. And because it's so nice, it's so clear that he loves me so much that he's not just confronting me because I'm being a pain in his butt, even though I was, but he's confronting me because he wants what's best for me. And so as he's talking to me, I'm hearing what he's saying, but I'm only half listening to that because the other half of my brain is like trying to analyze how he's doing what he's doing. Because I'm like, this guy's got some sort of Jedi mind trick. I've got to figure out how to do what he's doing right now. And so after that conversation, as I thought more about it, I realized really what Brad did was an extension of who Brad was. It was his humility as a person that enabled him to do that, not some sort of, conversational judo or something like that. And that's what began my fascination with humility. And so fast forward a few more years, I read this book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. How many of you have read Good to Great? Seen some head nods here. Yep, it's a classic, written in 2001. And so in it, Collins studies 11 companies that made the jump from being just average to being exceptional, good to great companies. And they sustained it over a long period of time. And Collins and his research team wanted to know, what is it about these companies that's so exceptional, and how can we, take that knowledge back into our companies? And so as he looked at it, there was this theme across all of them that they all had what he called a level 5 leader. And level 5 leaders had two traits. The first probably won't surprise anyone in business. They were relentlessly driven. They were ambitious. They pushed their companies to new heights. They made really difficult decisions, turned around underperforming divisions, even like confronted their family members who were in the business and who weren't pulling their weight. So very driven. Again, no surprise there. But the second factor was a big surprise, and that was that they were also incredibly humble, that they were described as being meek or modest or understated. And what's surprising about that is not just that CEOs typically aren't thought of as that, but the fact that you could be both driven and modest at the same time. It's like, this is a paradox that doesn't make sense. And so the research team is bringing this to Collins and saying, hey, this is one of the major factors. And he actually dismisses it. He says, no, we're always giving all this credit to leaders, too much blame, too much credit, keep looking. But as they dug into it, every single one of the good to great companies had a level 5 leader at the top. And every single one of the comparison companies did not. It was universal across the board. And basically he had to put it in the research because it's like, he's not a Christian, he's like, I don't get it, but I just know this is part of what makes companies great. And you look at this graph or look at that skyrocketing performance there. These companies outperform the market by 7 times. Meaning you would get 7x of your investment in a good to great company compared to the comparison companies over the same time. And so when I'm reading Good to Great and I'm reading this about humility, it's like, oh, wow, this thing that Brad did was not just something that works on college sophomore softball coaches. This is actually a fundamental leadership principle. And as a Christian, I should have known that because we talk about humility all the time. Even though Christians are terrible at humility, we at least know we're supposed to do it. go figure that like if we follow these principles that have been around for thousands of years, things will work out better. But for me, this was a light bulb moment that actually being humble could get better results. And so as I think about Brad and think about these leaders, what was it that made them so successful? Well, there's a number of things, but I think part of it, the part that I want to focus on today in this conversation, is their greater purpose. I talked about this already, that Brad, his purpose in that conversation was not just to get me to change my behavior, but it was really to see me grow and to become more of who I was meant to be. For these companies and these leaders, the goal was not just for them to become a celebrity CEO or make a ton of money. It was about the clients they served or the communities they impacted or the mission that they were striving after. And for me, at my worst moments, the opposite's true. Instead of having this greater purpose beyond myself, my purpose is myself. It's preserving my authority. It's preserving my safety. It's kind of like self-protective. And one of the lines that Colin said is that these leaders were always ambitious, but it was never for themselves. It was never about them. They were the people who were growing talent so that there was a rich pipeline of people to replace them whenever they left. In contrast, the leaders of the comparison companies, they were often super smart. They were called the genius with 1,000 helpers because they're like, I'm the big brain, come do all my bidding. And it actually worked well for a short period of time oftentimes. But as soon as they left, the company imploded because there was no one around to do any thinking anymore. But these good to great leaders, they had this purpose of building a company that would outlast them. And so they're investing into talent around them. And so it's this greater purpose that I want to drill into today, and specifically to help you think about what is your greater purpose? How do you get clarity on that? And how do you keep that front and center throughout your days and throughout your decisions? Because you can have a purpose on the wall, but if it's not happening in the hall, it's not making much of a difference. And so that's what I want to dig into today. But again, here's the sad truth is that there are lots and lots of times where I am not very good at this. How many of you have kids? See a show of hands here. Okay, yep, everybody. This is my family. Aren't they adorable, right? This is the part where you get to say, aw. But yeah, as all of us know as parents, at our best moments, we want what's best for our kids, right? We are willing to sacrifice and to help them succeed. And we do all kinds of difficult things. I mean, childbirth, holy cow. Who in the world would give birth to a child voluntarily? Unless there was like some greater purpose to that, right? Because I've not done it, but I've been really close to seeing it happen and it does not seem like a very enjoyable experience. So clearly there's like some greater purpose there. And that just continues on the rest of life, right? That it's about something beyond you. But at my worst moments, my greater purpose is not my kids. My purpose is a very small purpose. It's about myself. And if you've ever seen parents like wailing on their kids at the grocery store or losing it on their kids in public, this is one of those moments where instead of that greater purpose of asking, what's the best thing for my kids' moral and spiritual and relational development in this moment right now? Instead, they're thinking, you're embarrassing me. You are slowing me down. You are getting in the way of the things I want to do, right? And again, I've been guilty of this too. Hypothetically, if one of my kids, if I told them to do something and they said, no, I won't, to my face, when humble Josh shows up, humble Josh is able to let that roll off his back because it's like, you know what? This is not about me. What does this child need to understand about respecting authority and listening well that's really going to help them grow, right? I can't just like let that go, but I want to address it in a way that's good for them. Insecure, self-centered Josh is, how dare you respect me? How many times are you seriously, right? It's about me. And so I get defensive, I discipline in anger, I skip over like the steps of escalation, what I should do in that situation because it becomes about me. I think most parents can relate to that. Anyone else willing to admit that they've like responded to their kids in anger or frustration? It's been about them at that time. Okay, thank you. Everyone but Sarah has done this. So 2 hands up for Sarah. All right. So we see this in parenting, but the truth is that this happens in every sphere of life. This happens in business as well. I think about times when I was leading a team of 22 people, I'm trying to work across the divisions and within my organization. And, I'd have to challenge people to think differently about situations or move something forward that is not a priority for them. And again, on my best days, I'm thinking, hey, this is what's best for our students. This is what's best for our clients. This is what needs to happen. let's think differently. Let's dig in and work harder. But there are other times when I'm pushing it forward because I need this to work because my ego is wrapped up in this. And if this fails, I look bad. Or I meet with a client or a prospective client and I'm trying to figure out what's the least I can do before they'll start paying me. Because I don't want to give away too much. I don't want them to take advantage of me. And so again, it's self-focused instead of thinking, how can I serve them and help them be better and trust that if I do that, everything's going to work out okay. Or the times where I do good work, but I do it because I want appreciation, because I want applause, instead of doing good work because good work is the right thing to do. Because good work is what I'm privileged to do, to use my strengths to kind of come and contribute in this moment. And I got to trust that I'm going to do good work because I'm the kind of person who does good work. Because that's why I'm here, is to try and help make a difference. And if they appreciate it, that's great. If not, that's fine. That's not why I do it. And so the problem when we have those self-centered purposes is, again, I start to have an agenda. I start trying to shift things in my direction. I start to feel really slimy when I'm serving someone because I'm like, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Like, it just feels weird. When I do it for applause and people don't applaud, I start to get demoralized and frustrated and burned out. And the solution is, if I can find this greater purpose beyond myself, I can actually work really hard and do incredible things, but do it for the right reasons and do it in a sustainable way. And the solution to that, I think, is humbler leadership. And so I want to talk about that, but first let me define that and tell you where we're going today. So today in this session, a couple of things I want to do. I want to teach you the 4 pillars of humble leadership and share one practical strategy you can use to become humbler. One of my pet peeves is that most motivational talks or workshops don't work because you don't actually do anything with them afterward. And if you're not doing anything with it, it's not doing anything to you. And so I really want to get practical here. And I would hope that as you're listening today, that you would write down some thoughts on practical ways you could take this and run with it. I'll share what's worked for me, what's gonna work for you. Putting some action behind that is going to be the difference between this being like, oh, a fun conversation with Josh and Sarah, to, oh, wow, that's actually impacting me down the road. But first, let me get to that definition of humble leadership. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a Christian, and so humility has been part of my vocabulary for a long time. But this book, if you've started reading it, you know it's not really a faith-based book. It's a research-based book. And the reason for that is that when I started coaching leaders, executives, I realizing people have a variety of worldviews. Some people are Christians, some are Muslims, some have no faith background at all. And because I've been through this journey of trying to become humbler, I've seen the benefit personally. But I realized if you don't come from a similar background where humility is a virtue in your culture or in your worldview, why would you do it? I literally had a leader I was coaching one time, a military veteran, say, you know, you're telling me to show weakness to people? Like, you don't show weakness to the enemy. That's the last thing you would do. And he said that, I thought, okay, first of all, your people aren't the enemy. So let's get clear on that. But secondly, yeah, I get that. If you're coming from that perspective alone, that makes sense. But there's something to this humility, vulnerability thing that works. How can I make that case to you? And so I spent 3 years going through the social science research on this, the 2 decades since Jim Collins wrote Good to Great, to figure out what is humility actually from the research, why did it work, how does it work, and make a research-driven case for it. And that's what I want to share today, the 4 pillars that we see in social science research. So the first is an accurate self-perception, an accurate view of me and you, as one of my friends, Arlen Friesen, says. And this is understanding, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? It's really living honestly with ourselves. And if we're honest with ourselves, this is not how we typically function. Having a really accurate view of myself is often really scary. I've even had clients say, hey, I know I need to do some work, but I'm kind of nervous because I'm scared about what I'm going to find as we get into coaching. And it's like, yeah, well, that stuff's there, whether you talk about it or not, right? Whether you know you have cancer or don't. If you have cancer, you have cancer. I would prefer to deal with that, to know what's there so we can make it better. And that's what humble leaders do, is they're willing to get into it because they know that managing themselves begins with understanding themselves. You know, if I know I talk too much, that helps me talk less so that other people can have space to share. But I've got to know that I talk too much in order to make that adjustment. And this is a bit in contrast to how we typically think of humility, because oftentimes we think about someone being humble, we think that they have a low view of themselves. It's like when you go to someone's house for dinner and you say, oh, wow, that that chicken was so great, Janice. And Janice is like, oh, I can't believe you even ate it. Oh, it was so dry. Oh no, it was terrible. I oversalted it, right? And they kind of beat themselves up. Janice actually would never do this, I'm sure, but just picking on Janice because I can see her here. But what's happening in that moment, that's actually not humility. That's either like low self-esteem or false modesty or something else. Humility is living in reality. When we say humble people are grounded, we mean they have their feet firmly planted on the ground. It's actually that the humble and grounded have the same root word, hummus, meaning again, they're rooted in reality. And so if I made a great meal, yeah, I recognize it was a great meal. That was so good, wasn't it? Man, I'm so glad it turned out that way. Not in a bragging way, but just like, yeah, that's reality. But I also understand my weaknesses as well and say, man, that was a great chicken, but whew, I butchered that salad, right? Can we just be honest about that? And be able to accept that with open hands, to recognize that the universe does not revolve around me, but I play an important part in the universe. That I've got some incredible gifts to bring to my community, and to pretend I don't would really be to do a disservice to other people. But man, I have so many weaknesses. I have so many issues, y'all, if you just knew. But when I have that view of myself and see those two extremes of my beauty and my brokenness, my strengths and my weaknesses, then I'm able to hold myself more lightly and give other people grace as well. And so this is where it all starts, is with this accurate self-perception. The second pillar is appreciating others' strengths and contributions. And this flows naturally out of the first, because once I understand my strengths and weaknesses, I understand, okay, this is the lane that I can contribute in, and it's so cool I get to have this experience and get to offer this. But man, I need all these other people here. I may be the world's best salesman, I'm charismatic and engaging, all that kind of stuff, but man, I do not want to manage the books. Thank goodness for Barbara in accounting, right? Barbara saves my bacon every month. And instead of like belittling Barbara and say, oh, accountants, who cares? It's like, no, man, I appreciate more than ever that she's using her unique gifts, because we're the body of many parts. I need her to be at her best so that I can be at my best, and vice versa. We're interdependent, not independent. And that frees us up to collaborate instead of compete with one another. I don't need Barbara to look bad so that I feel better by comparison. I want us to work together well, because I know that we thrive when that happens. And as one of my friends, Davin Silvano, says, humble leaders then get to be the spotlight instead of always needing to be in the spotlight. I want to shine attention on the great things other people are doing, because I'm so excited. I'm so thrilled that people around me are thriving. And I become a talent scout, looking for people who have gifts that they don't even know about, and try to draw those things out, because again, that's where I get so much value. And I know that if you are doing your best work, then our whole world, our whole community is better for it. So that's the second piece, appreciating other strengths. The third is a growth mindset. And I can say a whole lot on this topic, but I'm going to try to be quick here. Basically, this is research from Carol Dweck on fixed versus growth mindsets. And fixed mindset folks believe that your success is driven by your talent, and your talent is fixed. So if you're great at math, it's because you got the math gene. You just got lucky. Or if you're a great athlete, it's just because your parents are great athletes. And there's some truth to that, right? That like our natural ability definitely shapes our future. But actually, reality doesn't show that to be the biggest factor. As you look at research and look at high performers over time, it's the effort and the process that people put in that determines their success, not just their natural ability. So, if you're LeBron James and you're 6'8" or whatever, hey, that's great to make it in the NBA. But there are a lot of 6'8" guys who are not in the NBA. And there are a lot of guys who are not 6'8" who are in the NBA, because they are putting in the work. They're the first ones in the locker room and the last one out. They're taking care of their bodies. They're watching film. They're doing all these things to grow. And they're much more focused on getting better than on showing that they have it all together. It's not about proving themselves, but about improving themselves. And so fixed-minded people, they want to just compete against people who are below them, because every time they win, it makes them feel good. It validates their natural ability. But growth-minded leaders are always taking on new challenges, because for them, the goal is growth and improvement, not just performance. And Satya Nadella talks about it this way at Microsoft. He says, we want to move from being a bunch of know-it-alls who think we have it all figured out to a bunch of learn-it-alls, people who have this intellectual curiosity and recognize that we don't have this all figured out. And what that does when you embrace this, it frees you up from having to be right all the time, to always be the person who has the right answer, and instead focus on getting it right. Hey, here's one idea. This may not be the best one, but let's get a conversation going. Let's emerge with a really great idea. It doesn't have to be my idea. I care more about us performing well than about who gets the credit. And it's amazing what happens whenever you can operate in that space. All right, lastly here, the final purpose is greater purpose, the pillar that I want to focus on today. Humble leaders give themselves to a cause beyond themselves. It's not about them. And Rick Warren captures this well when he says, true humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. Again, not a low view, but I focus on myself, not so that I can be self-centered, but so that I can make the best use of the gifts and abilities that I can to manage my brokenness and stuff, so that I can be in service of a greater purpose. And that can mean different things for different people. I mentioned earlier that I'm naturally talkative. And so for me, that greater purpose means I often need to shut up when I'm in coaching calls, because I know people learn from reflecting, not from me just like dumping insight into their brain like I'm doing right now, okay, as this in a workshop setting. And so for me, that means I need to quiet down in those coaching settings. But for some of you, the opposite may be true. You might be the only woman on your board, and you know that the decision that folks are about to make is a really bad decision, and you don't want to be that person raising this point because it's unpopular and no one agrees with you. But because of your greater purpose of wanting to serve the organization, you're willing to make yourself uncomfortable and say, hey, I've got to push back on this. And so whatever this means for you, this greater purpose is the animus that compels us to stretch ourselves and do things outside our comfort zone in service of that greater purpose. You might be asking if this actually works. And obviously I wouldn't be talking about it if it didn't. But for those of you who like some research here, just 3 points from research, there's a lot more in the book, but 3 things that stood out to me. Humble people have lower stress and greater happiness because they recognize their limitations, because they hold things more loosely, because they have the growth mindset. When bad stuff happens to them, they don't take it as hard. They're more resilient. They're more at peace. They just have better life satisfaction overall. Humble leaders build stronger teams. Go figure that people would want to support a leader that's not working in service of themselves, but working in service of a greater purpose. Or that when leaders have a growth mindset themselves and they admit their weaknesses, they too feel like, oh, okay, I don't have to hide all my flaws here. I can actually own that and then work on getting better at it instead of sweeping it under the rug. And so their teams are more cohesive and they're higher performing. And then humble CEOs, their companies actually outperform companies led by CEOs that are not humble. It's a study of 105 tech firms that found that because humble CEOs are open to being challenged and they want the best ideas, doesn't always have to be them that looks smart. Their teams make better strategic decisions, which lead to better financial results over time. And so in all areas of life, whether it's your personal life, your teams, or at the organizational level, humility is paying these tremendous dividends. And so if you're wanting for the practical stuff now, and we're talking about like the theory and the framework, what can you actually do about this? That's where I want to drill into the power of purpose and give you something really practical today that you can get your arms around. So let me just explain, first of all, the power of purpose from research here. So there's a couple fascinating studies that Adam Grant did on phonathons. How many of you have ever done a phonathon before to like raise money for your organization? No? Okay, 2 people. So I did it in college. It was pretty exhausting for me. I was like not comfortable on the phone or doing sales before. So it was a very stretching opportunity. And so in 2007, Adam Grant and a research team wanted to know what they could do to motivate students and empower them to raise more money and accomplish more. And so they put together 3 different groups to test some ideas. The first group, their control had no change in terms of what their preparation was. The second group took 5 minutes to read a letter from one of the students that was the scholarships had impacted. So these people they're calling alumni from university to raise money for student scholarships. They read a letter from someone who had benefited from one of those scholarships. The third group read that letter, and then they took 5 minutes to meet the student that wrote the letter and just interact with them, get to know them, put a face to the letter. And so Grant and his team did that, again, 10 minutes of intervention for the third group, 5 minutes for the second, and came back a month later just to see, did it make a difference at all? And here's what was pretty astounding about that. The second group, there was no difference from the first group at all, raised the same amount of money. But the third group, they spent 142% more time on the phone and raised 171% more money. Just wrap your mind around that. A 10-minute intervention led to almost doubling the amount of money that they raised, just because these callers understood, oh, wow, this is not just like a minimum wage job I'm doing to pay the bills. This matters. This matters for a person. This matters for John, or whatever the guy's name is. And so that was kind of this landmark study. But some people raise the question, well, is that just like any kind of motivation? If you would have made them watch motivational videos, would it made a difference? What was really going on there? And so Adam Grant goes back and does a similar study in the future. And again, does 3 different groups. One group has no difference. The second group reads a letter from a former caller explaining how the process of doing a phone-a-thon benefited him. I learned to be more assertive on the phone. I learned social skills, all that kind of stuff. And the third group read a letter from a student about, again, how the scholarships impacted that person. In other words, the 2 treatment groups, one was focusing on the benefits to you individually. The other group was focused on the benefits to the other people that they're serving. And just like last time, the group where they got no change, or it focused on the benefits to them, no difference in their time on the phone or money raised. But the group that focused on how their work benefited others doubled the amount of money that they raised. And so what's the message for you in the midst of this? The message is that while it seems so natural to be self-centered and focused on what's in it for me all the time, we actually find deeper joy and more sustainable motivation over the long haul by focusing on how we can benefit other people. And for me, the personal example of this is my dad. My dad did not graduate with a college degree. He spent a lot of his working years in construction, crawling under houses or on top of houses, terrible conditions, working long hours for not great money. And he didn't do it because he thought it was fun to go, crawl through spider webs and stuff. He did it because he loved his kids. And he wanted his kids to have a better life than he did. And so that greater purpose was what enabled him to do those things and sustain it grueling hours over a long period of time. And I think the same is probably true for many of us, that again, we don't always get the benefit of the instant gratification of seeing the impact of the work we do. I've had mentors who have had conversations with me, and they wouldn't have seen the impact of that I'm still thinking about those conversations today. And if they would have lost hope because it was so focused on the moment and what's in it for me in this moment, maybe we both would have missed out on that benefit. And so what can you do to tap into this greater purpose? Well, here are some questions that I would encourage you to think about. I love this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. He says, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? What problems are you solving for your clients? What problems are you solving for your coworkers, for the community, for your kids even? My dad, I know, felt some pride in helping a single mom of 2 kids get her dishwasher working again, right? He got some joy from that and from serving his family. Asking this question, I think it's easy to think, oh, you look at this and think, oh man, I'm in insurance. Maybe I should quit and go work at a nonprofit. Maybe. But honestly, what you do matters. And the people you serve with your insurance actually matters. If people don't have insurance, I can attest to this right now. Thank God we have homeowners insurance, because we discovered a water leak in our house 2 months ago. And our nationwide coverage has put us up in a hotel and now an Airbnb, and are managing the contractors. And thank God that I'm not out tens of thousands of dollars for this work. And so you could say, I just write insurance policies. It's nothing fun. Or you could say, I allow people to keep their homes that they might lose otherwise if they had a catastrophic damage. That's an impact to another person. And so, yeah, maybe this caused you to go change careers, but maybe it's just reframing what you do. Not in a way that's like some sort of just like motivational shot in the arm, but actually focusing on the real reason you do what you do. The real purpose beyond making money, beyond providing, a comfortable life for yourself. Those are self-centered things. Who are you ultimately serving, and what difference are you making in the world? You're not just planning events, you're creating space for authentic human connection. You're not just writing grants, you're finding resources to support entrepreneurs or support nonprofits that are doing good work but don't have the resources to continue. Again, step back and think about what am I actually doing for others? A couple other questions that I'd encourage you to wrestle with. Why would the world be worse off if you disappeared? Who would miss you right away? What work would be left undone? What people group would go underserved? And again, it's easy to think about your clients here or about like the to-do list you have that seems so long and important. But I would encourage you to start here by the people who share your last name and your address. Your kids, your family, your spouse, if you have one. And because those are the people that should be first priority, and you were the only mom that or husband or whatever that those people may have. Once you get some clarity on this greater purpose, ask, how can you keep this greater purpose front and center? It is so easy to focus on what's most immediate and urgent, even if those things are not the most important. Yeah, frankly, I'm in the business of helping people become more of who they're made to be, by coaching and training and books and things like that. It's a very noble purpose, and I believe that is true. But it is so easy to focus on my revenue and how am I doing month over month? You know, how many clients have I landed? How many doors are open? Oh, things are slowing down. Those are very self-centered purposes. And I have, even though I wrote a book on this stuff, I have to consciously, probably 4 times a week, like reframe and think, no, how can I add more value to the people that I care about? How can I be more of a service to the community? And trust that if I do that, things will be fine. And I can tell you from experience, things are fine when you do that. Things do not work out very well when it becomes very self-centered. And so how do you keep this front and center? Again, for me, it's like I've got to like recite it on a regular basis. I journal about it. Some of you, maybe it's like hanging it up on your wall. You've got an organizational mission statement, it's reciting it as you plan your day or talking about it at the beginning of every meeting that you have. And that really gets to this third question here, which is what would be different if every decision truly came down to your greater purpose? It's easy to say that we're in the business of improving communities, but how does that mission determine how you plan a fundraising event or what staff you hire? You should be asking every time, how is this advancing our greater purpose? If it's not, maybe this is not the right decision. If I followed you around in your day and watched how you made decisions, could I tell you what your purpose is without knowing it? What would I observe in your actions? What behaviors would I see? How would your resources be allocated? Would I come to the same conclusion that you say you were committed to already? If not, and again, I'm guilty of this too, right? I've got to continue to reorient myself toward that. If not, what can you do to take one step closer to that? And this is a daily process, not probably some sort of dramatic thing for you, but what are the daily rhythms or habits or disciplines you can put in your life that would help you live more in alignment with your purpose? Why don't we just pause and brainstorm? We've got a small group here. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What's coming up for you as I ask these questions here?
Anyone? Well, Trisha can't talk, so I'll look for her in the chat, but you guys can unmute if you can. Can you unmute? Are you able to unmute? Ask to unmute. Maybe I have to unmute you. Okay, there you go. Well, I was talking with Josh a little bit before we got started on a space where I like felt stronger, and Sarah knows about this too. Sarah's my coach. And so a space where I felt more vulnerable and emotion this week than I had before. And I really had to step back and assess it. And so the timing of reading through your book, Josh, was really profound in pillar 2, and helping me and really in this, like in thinking about what the greater purpose is and why we do it, and that it's not for us, it's beyond us. And that was something that I had to come full circle on. And you're right, it takes reminders frequently because we're human and we fall out of those spaces, and it's okay. But how you kind of when you were talking about being humble and how sometimes we struggle with what that means, I underlined oh gosh, where did I just write it? It was such a profound statement of what humble is. Being humble, it's the root, right? It was the root you explained. And that was different than what I had kind of like when I think of the word humble can you say that again?
Like being grounded, is that what you mean? Like the root word there?
Yeah, the root word of it. Yeah.
Yeah, hummus. So the same root that we have for like chickpea dip. Yeah, hummus meaning like of the earth or like close to the earth. We say people are, they're got their feet firmly planted on the ground, or they're very grounded. That's another way of expressing humility.
Yeah, that was something that just stuck out to me, because I often struggle with, when I hear, oh, I should be more humble, or I feel like I wasn't humble in that situation. I don't often associate it with like rooting myself in the ground either. I feel like that's kind of like this confidence, bold stance. And that sometimes feels the opposite of humble for me, where humble feels like I have to back up and I have to come down, where like you're making it be like this more rooted stance. And I really liked how that perception of it too. So
Yeah, and there's something about when I'm confident in what I can do, but not because I need to seem like I have it all together, or like
yeah.
because I'm insecure in this area, I'm gonna like over index on this other area. When I'm holding it so loosely, it's like, well, yeah, I'm a good speaker. I mean, I do it for a living, so hopefully I'd be okay at it. I'm not the best, but I'm better than average. Hopefully that's true. But I don't need to like tout it or swagger around. It's just like, well, it is reality, right? Here's the stuff I'm bad at that I'm currently working on, and I'm
Yes.
not upset about that stuff either. It's kind of a very almost stoic way to approach yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Diana.
So for myself, my company is a sales-based company, and when I first started, I really, okay, I gotta get a sale, I gotta get a sale, I gotta get a sale, I gotta sell. And then I stepped back, and then I was almost ready to stop because it's so not me. It didn't feel like me. And once I realized that connecting to people and finding out, not worrying about the sale, finding out what I could find as a solution to help them, it made it easy. I mean, the sale was just a bonus. It was what I could do to help them was the big picture. So to me, that was a huge awakening for me to even learn that.
Mm-hmm.
100% with you, Diana. Yeah, because I do all the sales for my business, and as I've tried to lean into this over the last 3 years of writing this book, my approach has changed a bit, and probably subtle to other people, but it feels huge to me to go in open-handed and say, hey, like, you have some leadership problems, so I'd love to help you. And if I'm not the right person for you, I want you to find the right person, because I would hate for you to spend money on me and not actually get the results you want. That wouldn't be very gracious to me. That's not good stewardship for you. Like, I want what's best for you. I think I'm pretty good, but I'm not for everybody. So, can I give you some recommendations on somebody else if it's not me? What are you looking for? And when you can say that genuinely, people are so attracted to that. They're like, wow, we trust you because you want what's best for us. Yeah, we want to work with you. And you end up actually winning a lot of business, and you miss out on some too. But it's just so much more fun. For me, that's the big thing, is like, I just hate feeling like I'm twisting people's arm to make them do something they don't want to do, because that doesn't fit with my purpose. That's not who I want to be. And so, yeah, it's way, you sleep so much better at night actually trying to live into this greater purpose for your clients.
Absolutely.
Well, I can wrap this up with a few more resources, and then we can just do kind of open Q&A here if we want.
Yeah.
Can I throw in one more thing? Sorry, my husband was talking to me over my shoulder. I think that for me, I didn't always have great examples of humble leadership growing up in the church. I think that it really was more of the negative side of humble, of, you had a slide that talked about not having a low view of yourself. And I think there's just been a lot of examples for me in that. And so I tend to have a negative reaction to humble leadership, because I'm like, I don't think that's it either, downplaying everything and always speaking, well, I just don't really know what I'm doing. It's like, well, you do. It comes across so inauthentic. And so I think for me, that line too that you had of like, it's either time to shut up or speak up, I think I've always gone on the side of shutting up, because I had these examples, and I don't want to just play the blame game, but the whole point is, I think for me, learning about humble leadership is about that idea is always calling you up to be your best, calling you up into something, and never forcing you to be smaller than you actually are. It doesn't mean I'm asserting, I have a lot of, very, I call it red energy, more aggressive energy. It doesn't mean I'm always pushing myself forward, but it does mean I can show up and take up space there too. I have something to contribute. So I feel like there's just a tension there. I think that's what I'm processing for me.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sarah. And growing up in the church, I can totally resonate with what you see. And in my experience, the narrative was kind of like, oh, because you're a sinner, you should feel really crappy about yourself. And
Right.
you are humble because you're not God. But here's the thing about that.
You're dirt.
Right. The thing about that is that, again, if you believe in Jesus, the Christian faith, and you don't have to, to understand this point, but if you believe that, you believe that in the history of mankind, there was one person who was actually God's gift to mankind, and he was the last person to act like it. That Augustine says that if you look at Jesus' teaching, the first primary element was humility, the second was humility, and the third was humility. That Jesus, who had every right to have the swagger and think he was all that in a bag of chips, was actually the last person to act like it. And so when you think about it that way, it's like, oh, I'm not humble because I'm a terrible, dirt human being. It's like, well, actually, when I'm humble, I'm most like God. Like humility is actually a divine characteristic, not something we have to do because we are terribly inadequate.
Yeah.
And so when you think of it that way, it's like, whoa, that's a very different view of humility than you would grow up in a traditional conservative Christian church. So
yeah,
I know that's not for everybody in this call, maybe, but
sure.
just put misconceptions out there around like what humility actually is.
Sure. Yeah. I just listened to a fascinating podcast with a theologian named Carmen Imes. And, in our faith tradition of Christianity, we typically start with Genesis 3 and the sin and the dirt and the lowliness. And she challenged us to think about our salvation message starting in Genesis 1, that we were created to be
His image.
in his image, and that we as believers are image bearers and we co-create with him. That's that's pretty cool. So it's that both and tension and keeping yourself in check, like you said, a few times a week, bringing it down a little bit, and then a few times a week, bringing it up a little bit too.
Yeah, Saint Irenaeus says that the glory of God is man fully alive. That's where God is most honored and glorified, is when we living into becoming more of who we were made to be, living out the image of God, like you said. So totally agree there.
Yes, love it.
All right, so I want to make sure that we finish on time. I know we've just got a few minutes left. One question I encourage you to think about is what's the one thing you want to actually do after today's session? Again, if you thought this was a super fun conversation, thought-provoking, that's great. But if you're not actually doing anything with it, not much is going to change. And so chew on that. And I would love to have your insights as well. I can maybe drop the feedback thing in the chat. And two more things here. One is some resources that could be helpful. If you want to read further here, some of my favorite books on the topic listed out here: Leadership and Self-Deception, Mindset, Thinking Fast and Slow, Humility by C.J. Mahaney, and then of course my book. And on my website, you can find some additional resources like planning tools, also a humbler leadership assessment if you want to dig deeper there and actually kind of know where you rank according to the research. Not rank, but where your strongest pillar is and where your weakest pillar is right there.
Nice.
So with that, let me stop and take Q&A. And again, I'll drop that feedback in the chat. I would love to have your feedback on what went well here and what could be improved, just so other people can benefit from better presentations down the road.
Diana said she's sorry she had to drop off. Work was calling. So thank you, Josh. This was amazing. So
Thank you.
And Josh, this is Jan. When I'm in these kind of situations or these kind of this kind of forum, I tend to be more the sponge and try and listen with both ears and speak not as much. And I'm also one that I have to take it away and process it before I feel like I'm speaking intelligently. But I do want to bring up something that I kind of lifted my eyebrows when you brought up the book Good to Great, or Yeah, good to great. From good to great. In a previous life, one of the organizations I worked for hired a coach, and the coach did what a coach is supposed to do: encourage and build on strengths, but also she was into building up weaknesses, not punishing or demanding that you change. And unfortunately, our leadership, our upper echelon was so not good to great kind of material. But the expectation was and I think they did this because the coach said to do it, but I think if the leadership really buys into this and not just, hey, that's a good idea, but really lives it, they become the role model. It's a lot easier for their underlings to get on board and watch the role model grow or change. And I wrote that down too. Growth and improvement is the goal. If you can't get up in the morning and just full of wonder, what am I going to learn today, or what's going to happen today, or what do I get to do today that's going to make a difference? And that in itself is just such a good recipe. Growth and improvement is the goal. Yeah, but not just for yourself, for those around you and for those you work with, for those you work for. It really is for the greater good. So just points that I either had heard before, but really didn't think about them anymore, or I didn't think about them in the way that you shared. So I thank you for re-sparking my interest and my excitement.
Thanks for sharing, Janice. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
What would so you asked us to think about one thing that we could apply to work on this. What would you suggest if you could make a suggestion of one step to take to apply for us all? That would be today.
Yeah, I think if you don't have clarity on what your purpose is, you're not going to know when you're doing it and when you're not doing it, right? You're just going to go through the motions and do what everyone else assumes you're going to do. And so, for me, it was both like a marketing need and a personal need of like figuring out, okay, what's the tagline of my business, or what's my personal purpose, and how does that fit in? And so working to get that clarity of for me, help coaching leaders to become more of who they're made to be. Again, that's kind of the grounding thing. Like, I don't want to put something out just because I think it'll make money. I don't want to do something just because I think it'll get clients, right? If it's not helping people become more of who they're made to be at a deep level, then this is not for me. And that's okay. There's other people that do that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say, if you don't have clarity on that, figuring out what is that purpose. And it may not be that there's one purpose that covers every area of your life, but my purpose at work, or purposes at work. My purposes could be to be an encouragement to this coworker who I know is struggling. And this is just for a season because she's going through a divorce or whatever. My purpose could be to get my kids from 8th grade to high school because they're really struggling with this transition. And that's our family purpose right now.
Mm-hmm.
You can have more than one purpose, but focusing on that helps pull you out when you're just mad that the budget's short, or mad that this meeting is boring, or whatever it is. It helps you recenter and focus on the horizon of where you're going, not just on kind of the day-to-day mess that you're in.
I think that's great. It's a great place to start. And in all of your research, because you've done, like, your book is full of research, what did you find most interesting that maybe you didn't expect in all this to find? There
was a study I cited in the second half of the book on group intelligence that I thought was so fascinating. Basically, they were trying to figure out, first of all, does a group have an intelligence? Just like a human being has an IQ, a stable IQ that's stable across situations. Is a group smart at a certain level? And they found out the answer to that is yeah, they do. There are smart teams and then not quite as smart teams. But then what's the biggest predictor of that? Is it the group that has the smartest single person, like the genius? That's what determines that a group is smart? Or is it like the average intelligence of the group? Is that what makes for a smart group? Mm-hmm. And actually, what the predictor was the average social intelligence of the group. Specifically, how well they took turns and listened to each other and drew out the best of what everyone else had to offer.
Mm.
those teams were actually the smartest. Those are the people that you want to go to trivia night on Tuesdays at the bar with, not like just the one guy that, thinks he knows it all.
Yeah.
And so that just brings so much hope for people like me that are not geniuses to think, hey, I may not know the answer to every question, but if I can get the best out of everybody, we will make good decisions together. And that's just so fun to think about how that interdependence we win together. And it's a more fun way to win than just needing to deal with all the idiots, the genius with 1,000 helpers kind of mindset. That's pretty lonely to be the one genius in the room with 1,000 helpers. I'd rather have a bunch of friends tackling these problems together.
I think that's so hopeful for 52 Connections too. Like, let's do this together. Let's use each other's strengths and gifts and figure this all out and connect more together. It speaks so much into that purpose of this.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. I liked the telethon statistics and the research and that came from that. That was also very promising and hopeful, and it spoke loudly of just being able to share stories from other people's success and other people's testimonies. And, just that, like, taking that time to connect, it's not the quick, right? It's really listening, really leaning in, really trying to understand the person, whether it's on the phone or face to face, and just taking that little extra moment to connect. And just the really amazing, incredible change. Like you said, that number went double the amount of funds came in. And even if it's not monetary, just the non-monetary experiences that can come from just that, taking that little moment extra and realizing that.
Sure.
Very cool. Sarah, oh yeah, you unmuted.
Yeah, so I have a question. I don't know if this is part of your research or not, but it's a question that I think about in my own work, because I really believe in that idea of, we're one body and we have one job to do together. We're all just different parts. But I don't know how to say it as succinctly, but that idea of, like, I need to be at my best and you need to be at your best so that we can all work together to do what we have to do. But what I struggle with sometimes is I don't do it for you, like in this way of, always pouring my cup out for someone else. And also, there isn't guilt there if you aren't at your best right now. If this is a season of struggle or hardship or whatever, that's also what the body does, is that you're not doing well, but I am, so let's pull each other up. I just wonder if you have any experience with how to kind of navigate that for people. I think especially for women, this is really hard because we tend to be more helpers and nurturers and giver-awayers of ourselves without taking care of ourselves. How do you kind of navigate that piece of it? I don't even know if that's a good question, but that's kind of what I was pondering.
No, that is a good question. Yeah, my wife is an Enneagram 2. Anybody familiar with
Yes.
Enneagram out there, right?
Yes,
So
I'm an 8. Yes. Yep.
I get it.
And I'm a 7. And so, life works for me pretty well all the time. I go have fun. My wife, wants to take care and support things, but then it starts to go wrong when she starts to get burned out, and then she starts to feel like the victim and the martyr. And I'm kind of like,
yes,
we're all sitting here. Why don't you just sit down with us? Like, it's actually okay
Yes.
to just, do that.
yes.
And so I think for me personally, I did not do a good job with self-care early in my career, and I got close to burnout and had to learn it the hard way. And I think the reason I don't, again, for me coming up as a Christian, it's kind of like, well, just serve and pour yourself out, and that's what we're here to do, And I agree, like, that's the point, but you can't pour from an empty cup. And that's where, like, well, do I focus on myself or focus on others? And oftentimes we vacillate between both extremes. I'm so burned out, I pour myself out so much, and I just pour, and then I'm so selfish and I can't talk to anyone because I'm just mad and you took advantage of me. And just like, well, either one of those is healthy. The reality is, like, I got to go scoop up some more water so that I can pour it out again. I care for myself so that I can care for you. I don't care for myself because I'm entitled and I deserve it, and you don't have a right on my time. Okay, sure, but like, that's a pretty stingy way to live. Like, if I'm not getting 8 hours of sleep and I'm not spending time journaling and reflecting in the morning, I'm not as good for my clients. And so I
Mm.
need to do that because that's the best way for me to care for other people. And again, if I'm pouring out too much and not caring for myself, that's not good stewardship. If I'm hoarding it all, not pouring it out, that's not good stewardship either. And so it's finding that right amount of self-care, again, in service of the larger purpose for me. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, I like what you said. I taking notes here on my phone because I always send myself emails. I care for myself so I can care for others. And if ultimately caring for others is the point, I like how you said it in that way. Because it is tricky. And I think that there are a lot of people in the church that just identify as Enneagram 2s because it's what we're told we should do. And then they have those behaviors, but they're not necessarily healthy. And that's not necessarily who they truly are. It's just because that's what they were told for so long. That's what they should be. So yeah, those are good thoughts, and just putting some language around how to do that. Because, I believe the greatest commandment is to love your neighbor, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, soul, love your neighbor as yourself. And I think we skip that last part. We've got to do some self-love there in order to be able to love our neighbors. But I think all of that gets convoluted really quickly.
Well, some of us are living that commandment out, but because we don't love ourselves very well, we're not loving other people very well either.
Yeah.
My perfectionist clients are like, people are mad that I, critique them for that. Well, if they knew half of what was going on in my head about myself all the time, that's nothing. And it's like, well, yeah, if I don't value my own space, if I don't value rest, if I'm always griping at myself in my own head, I'm going to do that to you too. And so again, the way I love myself is going to be the way I love you too. Again, not because it's about here about worshiping myself, but like I've got to care for myself well so that I can care for other people. I think the other thing too is, yeah, there's this one narrative that we should always serve, but one of the harder parts is that many of us who serve, we can over-index on that and find our value in serving. Meaning, if I'm helping other people and caring for them, why do they need me? Why do they love me? And again, that's where that accurate self-perception is important to realize, like, hey, my worth does not come from what people think about me. At the end of the day, nothing I can do can make God love me any more or make God love me any less. I serve and try to, create good fruit because I'm a healthy plant. I create good fruit, but I don't have worth because of what I produce for other people. Maybe in the marketplace I do, but in the eternal grand scheme of life, that's not where my worth comes from. And letting go of that and being vulnerable enough to say, yeah, you know what, I'm tired. I got to take a break. And trusting that people will still love me even when I do that. That's often the hardest thing for those 2s and people who identify as.
Yeah.
Josh, I can remember back in the day where they where self-care was on the cusp. I mean, this was a new concept. And I can remember it being explained to me. It's like a bank account. If you keep writing those checks and give to everybody, pretty soon you're going to have a zero as a balance because you've not made the deposits in to that bank account. And that bank account and those deposits are self-care. And it's not selfish. It's, as you've all said, but we've all said it differently. Those deposits allow us to write the checks to give to others. So I thought, I don't know why that was like decades ago, but yeah. So
well, you can tell it's decades ago because people were writing checks. I mean, it's to take your analogy one step further, Janice, when you write a check after you're at zero, then you're overdrawn. And you don't owe just the money that you spent, but you owe a penalty on top of that. And so again, you run the risk of actually doing severe damage when you wear yourself out, because that's when people leave their spouses and yell at their kids and cheat on the taxes, right? It's because I was spent yesterday. I'm like so far past that now. So again, it's not caring well for the people you were trying to care for when you overdraw on that account.
Well,
Thanks for that, Adam.
When other people withdraw from your account too, right? If other people are making withdrawals and there's not enough to deposit the deposits in here, and you know what I mean, that could work that way too.
Yeah. Thanks for those extra add-ons. Yeah, I gotta remember those.
Trisha says, thank you for all the great info and feedback. This was a great reminder to lead with a service heart. I do have to hop off for another meeting, but so many great things to bring to my team. So
So good.
And I will encourage everyone that's watching, if you're looking to invest in your leadership, or you're part of a team, or a team that's looking to invest in their leadership, reach out to Josh Wymore here. He's got like, it's an authentic approach. You've done your research. You've been doing this for a long time. You've helped so many people do this, and it comes from such a great heart. And I just appreciate you coming into our group, our community, and just taking the time to share your heart and mind with us too. I really do. This was really wonderful.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate
Mhm.
the chance to
Thank
be
you.
here.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to end our live stream here, and then we can chat for just a little moment. All right. So bye, everybody. We'll see you later. Watch everything. Reach out to Josh. All his links are in the chat, but I'm also going to link them in the group so that you'll have them to reach out. And there is also a Humbler Leadership Assessment that I will attach again so that you guys can complete that. Once you complete that, Josh will have some tools and resources, free tools and resources. There's like 5 to 7 free tools and resources that come right to your inbox after that. And you'll also have access to him communicating with you from now on through his YouTube channel and things that are coming up in his world that he has that you can tie on to too. So be sure to do that. I'll link that in there again. So, all right. Thank you everybody for joining in. We'll see you soon.